There we go. So, now it's time for the art critique. Today, on Mondays, I usually am doing the art critique for the characters. And we have already done it for the scout, the soldier, pyro, demo, have engineers, so only the support classes are left. We might as well go in order, I don't know. So the next one would be Medic. Let's begin. Also, not my build, let's pick the classic one. And for what iconic reasons, let's say, I think I would rather have the medic with the med gun instead of the syringe gun for this art critique. Basically considering the game design, right? Because if we're just looking at the art here, we wouldn't have any argument, let's say, for which one is closer to, I don't know, the creative vision stuff or something like that. But since you know of a little bit about the game, I think this is we have an argument to do the art critique with the medic using the med gun. So anyway, yeah. Okay. So as always, just some disclaimers, small stuff before I begin the art critique. First, I'm gonna dive. This is not like a game design analysis, which would be a different thing. I'm gonna focus more on the visual aspects here. I'm gonna talk a bit about game design because you know this is still part of the of a game, and I can't ignore that. But I think you understand what I'm saying here. And the other thing, the other disclaimer is that this art critique follows Feldman's method, which is all about going through 4 steps in order: description, analysis, interpretation, and judgment, or evaluation, both names work. On the description, I describe what I see. On the analysis, I talk about the elements of art for this work of art here. On the interpretation, I interpret the creative vision behind. And on the judgment step, I'm gonna call this a successful or unsuccessful work of art by looking at the principles of art here, which are basically how the elements of art were used. So the idea is to compare how the artist used the elements of art, compare that to the creative vision, how well they fit, and so after that I can say whether this is successful or unsuccessful based on that. That's kind of the idea. Also, I might as well mention, I usually say this, I don't always say this, and when I do it, usually later on the critique, but if I knew the artist, I could just ask them their creative vision and use that instead of interpreting. But it's alright. It's actually important for us to have to be able to interpret, right, in cases like this that I don't know the creator, or maybe the author is deceased already, stuff like that. So you know. But with all that said, finally, let's begin the art critique on the medic character for the game Team Fortress 2. So first things first, description. What do I see here? Wow, okay. It is some sort of doctor. They are using a med coat, right? Isn't that how you say it? Gloves and also a backpack and some sort of hose. Is this medic gonna extinguish a fire? We know it's the med gun, but let's try to be... I don't know. Should try to do things by the book, let's say. What else? Pants, boots. Not sure if these are boots or some sort of shoe, whatever. I think they are boots. Also in the backpack. Okay, so now it's harder to call this a hose because we have what appears to be some box. Okay, it has like a Red Cross symbol here, and it doesn't seem like water should come out of this, right? Apparently, maybe something touch electricity because of this part up here. So, and yeah, it's some kind of sci-fi thingamajigger, right? So only makes sense because of what we know of the game, that it's a mad bean that comes out of it and stuff. But just from looking at it and describing it, it's kind of a sci-fi thing, right? Some sort of... Is this a Ghostbuster gun to, you know, to imprison ghosts? Again, kind doesn't make too much sense. Just look at it, right? I mean, it could be, but it doesn't make sense considering the context, right? And also what we know of the game design, but whatever. Okay, anything else I would describe here? Caucasian male, glasses, dark hair. Has a belt with a little bag on the back of it, and also a side bag here. All of them have pouches, belts with pockets, by the way, and small bags. Don't know if you ever noticed. And I think that's mostly it, right? Not sure what else is there to describe without getting into the analysis, because stuff like all the colors and stuff are elements of art, so let's get into it. I think it's good enough to get on the analysis right now. So, the elements of art. Usually, I think most sources believe there to be 7 elements of art, which are lines, shapes, forms, space, texture, color, and value. 7. But some authors believe there to be an 8th one, which would be points and dots. To me, lately have been considering those authors to have that believe in 8 elements. Also, I think just makes more sense to me, and so that's what I have been going with. And so, with that said, let's talk about the elements of art here. On the analysis, there is no order I need to follow, so let's just begin with whatever I want here, or you want, but I would begin with points or dots. So, are there any here for this work of art? Let's see if there is any. We can zoom in, right, okay. Well, we could kind of say that there is one over here on this part of the apparatus. It would be a gray dot, very small one, singular. If I could look at it closer, then I could talk about how, I don't know, regular, let's say, the dot is, the point is. What else? So far just a gray dot over there. I think the buttons I would consider there to be shapes. I think they go over my threshold at least. I don't know. That's perhaps one problem of having points also, because when does it start being a point? When does it stop being a point and starts being a shape, right? So I don't know. But I wouldn't know if that's exactly the reason why not all authors consider points, but whatever. To me, I'm gonna consider here the buttons of the coat as shapes here. Mostly shapes. I don't think they fall too well into forms. Maybe a bit, but still. With that said, any other points I can see here somewhere? That's not. That's on the artwork, because I think there was a visual bug sometimes. I don't know. Over here, for example, I think this is the way it's moving make me believe it's only light being reflected, which is another element of art value. So I feel kind of confident of believing those are not points, much like here. Yeah, that's the part of the critique when things get subjective, depends on how you look at it. Yeah, I might, because a different art critic could do these things differently right now, but for this art critique, I'm gonna consider this should not be points, just this gray one. Similar thing here. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of like very tiny, what appears to be dots, but I'm gonna consider them as not dots, not points, and just the use of light here. I guess there's a question that we could ask, which is, could they be both? And not sure, honestly. Have never seen anything like that mentioned. Often I have seen mentioned that principles of art are the principles, not the elements, influence each other, and I have seen that in practice also. But for the elements, I don't know. I'm yet to see any source, any author making that statement. So anyway, I guess for points there's just like this gray one over here, which you could say it's a possibly it's just texture, but in this case I'm gonna consider it to be a point. Anyway, so yeah, basically what's my analysis on the points here. There's just one, it's a gray one, and I can't make out if it's like a regular point or not. When I say regular, it's like a perfectly spherical, let's say, point. Something like that. I don't know, it's like a pretty point. Is it a pretty point? Or like an ugly one that you just, if you try to do a dot, a point, sometimes it gets little imperfections, you know, stuff like that. But yeah. And since there's only one, there is not much else to say for, so yeah. So let's talk about lines now. For lines, you gotta be careful because sometimes stuff like, for example, here, I don't think there's any lines in between the gloves and the white lab coat. So that's an aesthetic that you see sometimes, lack of lines. In my previous analysis of Team Fortress 2 art, that was pretty common, so just gotta see if there is any exception here. Over here, there would be some lines here, but I believe they are all like just forms in this case. Basically like 3D geometry, let's say. Three-dimensionality and that. I don't believe lines were used here. What else? What else? I think I see some on the lab coat here, but I think they're also just forms, just how the lab coat is a bit folded on that part. Here, clearly just forms and shapes. On the belt, similar thing, I think it's either the belt. You could maybe believe it's a line here, but I believe it's just the light being reflected in a way that looks like a line. So it would be value instead. If we believe that elements of art cannot be two elements like merged together or something. What else? Because there is a reason why light and darkness is called value. Because when you use hues, I believe that's where when you use hues of color, you're just like adding white, it makes it brighter, and adding black makes it darker, and so that would be like a property. One way to do it is like as a property of color. So that would be different than having points and lines and stuff. But anyway, it got confusing. I admit. I have been doing this for some months now, but there's some stuff that that I wouldn't be surprised if I'm just wrong somewhere. But anyway, all that said, I don't think I see lines anywhere. That's not like actually forms or value or anything else, giving an illusion of it. So over here there's these details, but again I believe they're mostly forms. There's stuff similar thing on the ears of the medic, I guess, and the mouth. They're just 3D farms. And what else? Yeah, I don't think I see any lines here properly. If there is, it's like this stuff here, which is, I believe, is more about the use of value. So things get complicated. Wow. No, I'm just having an idea here right now. About value and light, something like. Because I consider the color of the points and dots, right? And the lines, and I think that's how meaningful, especially for stuff like pointillism, the art critique of the postmodernists. You know, that's one part of the reasons why I consider points as an element of art. Because how are you gonna talk about pointillism without mentioning points or dots? You know, it's kind of weird to me. And so the color of the points matter in that specific circumstance. And I was thinking something here, if the color of the points matter, shouldn't and I also consider the color of the lines, but should we consider the value of the lines? And so in this case this would be a line. But I don't know, I'll think I'll ponder about it eventually. For now I'm just gonna consider there are no lines here. What about then another element of art? Let's talk about shapes. Shapes, the stuff that you get, for example, when you enclose a space with a line, although you don't need lines for shapes. As I said, that's an aesthetic that you see sometimes, lack of lines. And for the shapes here, since this is 3D, obviously, since this is 3D, the shapes that change depending on the angle, because shapes are always two-dimensional. So, for example, here we see more of the shapes of the lab coat, but if you change the angle, then we see more the shapes of the legs. So, what are the most noticeable shapes here as I see them? Well, the lab coat has a pretty noticeable shape, I guess, through multiple angles. I would describe it. I'm not sure there is an easy geometrical shape to use to describe it here. I think it's unfair to call it like triangular. So I think it's just it has its own shape. We don't need to attribute a label to it, let's say. We have the shapes of the edge of the coat. What else? Technically every part of it has its own shapes, but sometimes you can just describe them with other words to simplify. Much like when I look at roofs for mini maps, I talk about trapezoidal shapes, just so I can kind of bunch them all together and make it easier to talk about them. When I see that makes sense. In here I think it's kind of a stretch to call this anything geometrical. So anyway, what else for shapes? For example, through this angle we see a circle here, but then it kind of gets turns into an elliptical shape on this part. And so an example of a small shape here that I see a bit. But what else? If it's not the edge of the coat, the legs I think are pretty noticeable also. It's like either the coat or the legs, right? So thin limbs with the foot and stuff. The feet, the feet and stuff. I'm Brazilian, by the way. What else? Funny how little geometrical shapes I see here on the Medic. It's mostly, I think, on the box head there, his back, and naturally here also on the mouth at the end of the Medigan. Interesting. We could also maybe talk about some kind of a rectangle on this part here, but anyway, it's all pretty unique on its own. It's only some parts, as I said, that I could describe it easily with something geometric, I would say. Here either a square or a rectangle, and depending on the angle, a hexagon. Like this angle, it's kind of the idea because it's once not a regular hexagon, but still it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so 6 sides hexagon through this angle. Although in this case, I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as I see it. So it's even a weirder hexagon because it's a concave hexagon in this case. But anyway, we are usually it's easier to think of a convex hexagon. In this case, it's a concave one. What else? Yeah, like most things here have their unique shapes. So they have the edge of the coat, the legs. I guess the medic's arms are pretty tightly close to the body, so I don't see that much the shapes of the arms. It's mostly a bigger torso. It's what comes out to me as the shapes go. So what else? Then there's the head. So there's like protuberance on the torso. Let's call it a very weird way to call a head, but anyway. And finally a little bit of geometry on the box at the back and on the circular, not spherical, spheres are 3D. The circular and the elliptical shapes and the mouth of the medigun. And the medigun has like its unique shape also. It's like has a lot of details when it comes to the shapes. A lot of unique shapes here altogether. Very cool. So a bunch of unique shapes, at least just like 2 small things for geometrical. End of lab coat, legs, torso, head, and medigun. I think that's my analysis on the shapes. For the most notable one to me. I didn't mention the pouches, for example, which are, you could also say it's geometrical, but I don't know, cause less of my attention. And let's talk about the forms now. Forms, the element that's all about 3D, depth, and height and width, but 3-dimensionality. So depth is an important part of it. And let's see here. Forms are always 3D. What's my analysis on the forms of the medic? I see a distinct. Okay, it's not a lack. I was going to say a lack, but there is some sparse use of sharp edges. The sharpest edges I can find are on the medic's elbows, depending on the angle. Like here is a little bit sharp, and on the pants. So, although I guess we do also have that on the end of the lab coat. I think it counts as a form. Yeah. Okay. Also, the end of the lab coat with all its flatness at the end of it. Also, I guess I should mention a lot of flat forms because it's a coat. And other than all of that, a lot of light edge, not that sharp. There are some edges. For example, on the medigun, there are a number of slight edges. But on the torso of the medic, like, no, I don't think there are any edges really. And what else? I'm not sure I would call it smooth. Don't think I would call it smooth, especially because of some details on the coat that time more to texture. But anyway, yeah, lack of sharp edges. With the exception of the cloak and some other examples. Flatness on the cloak. This like cylindrical, it's not exactly a cylindrical form for the medigun. Also pretty unique farms for the Madgun with this whole set of circular parts on the muzzle of the gun, I guess, the barrel of the gun. And yeah, and all of that, and finally some more geometrical forms on the stuff at his back. Basically, now I guess we can say kind of a cylindrical form here on this red thing, and a cubic form on the box. Ah, no kidding. A cubic form on the box, and also a little bit of geometry on geometrical forms on the pouches, but I don't know. Don't call my attention too much. This pouch is like a prismatic form, I believe, because it has like a slope at the angle. So trapezoidal shapes make prismatic forms. Today I learned. And for this one, I think for this other pouch here on the left, I think is also kind of a prismatic form, although a pretty sly one, a thin one. So yeah, and I think that's mostly it for the forms. Especially sparse use of sharp edges, but at the same time not exactly smooth. And a lot of unique forms and some use of geometrical ones. Yeah. Also, I guess stuff like the ear, nose, and mouth also refers to forms, but you know. That's I think they're not the focus here. Let's say when it comes to the forms. Focus emphasis is a principle of art. We're gonna get there, but anyway, let's do things in order. What time is it? Also, okay. So now let's talk about the element of space, because I think it only makes sense to talk about space after we talk about forms. Because forms, one way to describe forms is how the objects, in the art occupy the space around them. And so now let's talk about the space itself around them. So most noticeable, I think it's something similar to what I said for the demo man previously on his art critique, which is tightness on the arms, on the upper part. There is like tight space here below the armpit, a bit more generous over here, but still a lot of tight use of space between the torso of the medic and the many parts of the machines, between the medigun, the medigun and the medic, like this part tightness, a lot of tight spaces through it. Some generosity, although different, I think differently from what I said for the demo man, some generosity here between the end of the medigun and the medic's left arm, so a little bit of it there. But I think the most abundant, generous use of space is between the medic's legs. You know, just to, I think, in part I think it's a consequence of the pose they gave the medic here, because it could be with the arms tied together, right? But like the soldier on some taunts. But they didn't choose that for this pose, so that means a more abundant, generous use of space between the medic's legs, and a little bit also behind the coat, right? Under the end of the coat. That's an interesting use of space because it kind of like envelops the medic over there, right? It's still kind of a tight use of space, but I don't know. Yeah, so that's my analysis here between the legs, between the medigun and the medic's left arm, more generosity use of space, and the rest is mostly of tighter use of space. And specifically between the legs and the end of the lab coat, on the details of the medigun, how the medic holds it, and also between the medic and the parts of the medic gun. That's where I see a lot of tight use of space there. Yeah. Now let's talk about the element of value. Oh, value? I not. I don't know. Why not texture first? Texture, which is about the appearance of surfaces on the artwork. For example, here we can see kind of a rugged texture on the medic's legs, so that's an example of it. Also something like that on the coat, on like these parts, they're like a bit folded, slightly. So that's a texture, for example. Also on the medic's face, do I see any? I think it's mostly light and shadow. Don't think there are textures there really. I think maybe we can see a little bit here on the hair, on this more shaved part of the hair. Anywhere else? A little bit here on the lab coat, I just realized, very slightly. And that's mostly it, I think. I don't see any textures on the gloves, I don't see any on the medigun, although a lot of value there, a lot of light being reflected from the medigun. Nothing on the small belt bags. And yeah, so where I see texture here applied is basically on the pants and the lab coat, especially on the tights, right, in the inner side of the pants, and on the lab coat. On the lab coat, we can even talk about like being closer to the arms and the lateral parts of the body, because here in the medic's chest, in this part of the torso, I think it's smoother, let's say, no textures there. And although here at the back we see but that's just on this part, right? Because here at the back things get way more wavy in comparison. So yeah, so I think that's it for textures. So now let's talk about the element of value. Why not? As I said before, how about light and darkness, brightness and shadiness? We can see, for example, how light reflects on some parts of the medic. If you pay close attention on the legs here, we can see like this part has brightness being reflected on the right part, and on the left it is a bit shadier. And so also accompanying the textures, but we can see shadows underneath them. Also here under the armpits, shadows and light being reflected on the hair. As I said before, on all the details of the apparatus here of the medgun, the box on medic's back. As I said, here the medgun, we can see light being reflected through the extent of it. Also, by the way, the light is only being reflected this way because of how we are looking at the medic right here, right? In game, depending on the light source, things will be different. But I had to consider one presentation, let's say, for the character, so I chose this one. But if you go in game, if you like to do an art critique of the medic in game, depending on where you place the medic, things are gonna look possibly different, right? But that's just a part of it. I could have also done an art critique on the medic on the choose your class screen, but I think I'd rather do the art critique of him right here. But anyway, enough of that digression. So yeah, my analysis on the use of value. Yeah, and I already mentioned where I see brightness and darkness. And I guess I will also add that the intensity of the brightness seems way more intense than the one of the darkness, let's say. As I usually say, often I can still kind of make out the details of the textures here on the legs somewhat, even it's not pitch black, and also how bright the light reflects depending on the part. It's like pretty noticeable to me. stuff like on the pants, like supposedly this is a these are brown pants, and we can see white light reflecting. Some use of white here, you know, to communicate light being reflected. So all of that to say that I see a favoritism to brightness around. Darkness is less intense, and brightness is stronger. Pretty common for Team Fortress 2 art, and I also see it here. I'm yet to see except it's cool to see to even if we end up talking about something that we said before. Sometimes we find exceptions, so I think it's cool, even though sometimes it can get repetitive. It has happened before. I think the pyro at one point I mentioned to me had a lot of smoothness in what I usually see as which I usually see as a rare in Team Fortress 2 art. But anyway, depending on the art. Well, let's move on, because there's only one element of art left for me to talk about here, which is color. Finally, I think on the description I mentioned it, right? So yeah, we can talk about the red gloves, the white medical coat, medic coat, I think this is a dark brown pant or a very dark shade of grey. I would believe a very dark shade of brown, I guess. Black boots, a lot of black on the minigun. And up here a bunch of details in grey, some in red, the box is white. Some in blue over here at the top, I just realized. We have blue on the medic. And also a bunch of details in red, the crosses, the tie, what else? But the belt's black. So that's where I see all the colors, and for the most, I don't know, what I see as the strongest ones, let's say the most widely used, I think, or easy to notice, I think the white because of the lab coat, the medic coat. And there's a lot. I believe also the skin, being a Caucasian male, is a porcelain, perhaps. Not sure if this is a porcelain shade of white, but anyway. We can also mention that. What else for the use of color? Also on the box here, the medic's back. What else? And I forgot. If this was a blue medic, the gloves. I think the gloves would go blue, and also this thing maybe. But because of the game's design, right? So yeah. So what else? But let's consider the creator's presentation. They could. This is the same page to access for whatever team you're playing on, right? And so they chosen the red one, the red team. So let's consider that presentation. What else? Okay, so I mentioned the white, the dark brown, and the black is also pretty noticeable. Black boots, black belts, black strapping, I guess. The medgun has a lot of black in it, with a little bit of a dark shade of red, maybe, or brown. The medic's hair is black, so a lot of white, a lot of black. A number of red, as I said, the gloves and the thing on the back, and some details, like the symbol and the tie. And blue is like the least noticeable one to me. So for me it's like especially white and black or dark shades, right? Because the pens are not black to me. I think there are again some shade of dark brown or something like it. And what else? And also the red comes after that, I think the white and the brown comes more my attention than the red. And obviously then the blue. So that's it for my analysis on the use of color. Okay. Give me a second, please. So now let's go for the interpretation of the creative vision. Alright. What the author thinking? What did they have? What was their goal? Did they have any message they wanted to convey? This is the third step of Feldman's method for doing art critiques. And I think one thing is kind of obvious but very important to be said as I interpret, and I think that's kind of intuitive. This character, including the name, was designed, made, created as a playable character for Team Fortress 2, the Medic class, right? So obvious, right? Because we accessed it from within inside the game. We play with it. We know that this is we play against it. That's all kind of obvious, but I think it's important to be said. Also, because if we didn't mention this, and we were to compare different creative visions of different assets here, possibly they wouldn't have points in common, and that would make no sense. I kinda did it once with the small ammo pack and the map CP Sunshine. I've done an art critique on both of those and tried to compare their creative visions. And they didn't have any in common, but that doesn't make sense, right? As far as the game design goes, because the art serves the gameplay. So at least for many games, I think that's a good game design practice, and I think that's the case also for Team Fortress 2. So it's kind of important for us to say the obvious here. So yeah, that's it. But the obvious has been said now. So what else could we say for the creative vision here? So I already said to make a character class. I only said make a character for class for Team Fortress 2, the medic, right? I could kind of split those in two to say a character for Team Fortress 2 and to make this and to make it like a medic, you know, that to be the idea of this character. I think I will rather do that to separate, because there is some stuff that I can say just for a character for Team Fortress 2 and some stuff that I can say just for the idea of being some sort of medic of, you know, in-game. Some sort of physician, medic, all that stuff. Okay, so also a bit obvious, but anyway. And we could kind of also use a bit of the stuff that we talked about in the description analysis, right? The lab coat, the red crosses, the gloves, and their color. All of that we could tie to also this interpretation, if we wanted to make our argument stronger. What else? Already said make a character for Team Fortress 2, make a character with some sort of medic. I'm not sure if I would mention healer, because I think that you know, in real life medics don't go around chugging health potions or something. They like treat your wounds and do something for your body to heal itself depending on the situation. So you know, it varies. So I would just say a medic for now, medic / physician. But what other ideas I would consider part of the creative vision here? Okay, I think the idea of something sci-fi or perhaps tied to fantasy was important in how this character plays. Basically the Madigan, right? I think the idea of, because it could be some sort of mechanic more realistic, something like the medic has to go on melee and he starts bandaging you or something, you know? It could be something like that, for example. Would have many implications obviously, but in any case. But I think it was important for the creative vision here, and we know that ties to gameplay also, but anyway. For the way this character works is through some sort of sci-fi method or fantasy, like thing, you know. Yeah, which is basically the Madigan. That's where I see it coming from. It's not just any medic. It uses a Madigan. What even is a Madigan? You know, do your grandma know what a Madigan is? She probably, unless she's a Team Fortress 2 player and plays better than you, and also and rocket jumps on the speedrunning maps and stuff. She ought to not know that. So you know, a little bit of sci-fi is being applied here, or fantasy, but I think in this case more sci-fi. What else? I would consider fantasy just because, you know, it doesn't look like something that that we have in real life. But anything else I would add? Should this create a vision for the character? Okay, this is gonna tie a bit to what I just said, but I think the idea of some sort of intellectual was also a part of it. Because, you know, glasses, haha, nerds use glasses and stuff. I don't know, that's kind of a trope, I think. Nerds use glasses. And also tying a bit with the idea of using something sci-fi. If you're talking about something sci-fi tied to technology, this individual either built it or is versed in using it, right? So he has knowledge. And what else would I consider for the idea of an intellectual? Even being a medic, the medical profession demands knowledge of how the human body works, body, mind, and even spirit nowadays. It's funny, right? Because depending on the time period and the healers, it was like mostly spirit or what was being treated. I think the theory of humors was about that, right? I don't know. Maybe I'm just talking out of thin air here and talking nonsense, but whatever. But I still interpret here that the idea of to make a character intellectual, to convey that in one way or another, was important for the reasons that I have mentioned. And well, anything else? So we have four ideas for the creative vision here, right? That was that I came up with here. A character class 1442, a medic / physician that uses some sort of has something sci-fi to it. Also, there is some sort of intellectual. Also, to me, a medic / physician is not obvious when it's not necessarily tied to being an intellectual, because you can have like mad doctors and stuff, right? So you know. But in any case, or maybe charlatans, false doctors that are not necessarily intellectuals. But anyway. Anything else I would interpret was important for the creative vision here. Artistically, right? Because on the lore, Medic is kind of a crazy dude. So, but I'm just looking at the visuals here. I'm not even mentioning the fact that Medic is German, which is an important part for the character, important for the game design of it. But because of stuff like the name of the guns, the Kritzkrieg, the Bloodsauger. Do we have anything right here also? Stuff like that. So that only makes sense because we know Medic speaks German, right? Imagine if you gave a gun like maybe it wouldn't be too weird, but it kind of ties well to the game design. The Medic being German, having some guns with German sounding words. Perhaps it's even a real word in German. I wouldn't know. I don't speak German, but yeah. In any case, although Kritzkrieg probably is not a real word in German, but it's probably just a reference to the Blitzkrieg tactic that the Germans used in World War II, and etc. etc. Anyway, yeah. So far we have those 4 ideas for the creative vision. So visually here, right? I don't see any cues that the magic is German here on visually, for example. So what else? I think that's mostly it. I think that's good enough. Those 4 ideas are good enough to describe the character visuals here. For me at least. Something. So, character class 1442, to be a medic slash physician, to be tied to sci-fi some way or another, and finally to be some sort of intellectual. I'm thinking about the pouches, if I would add anything related to them for just like a last idea. No, I'm not sure. I think let's stick to just those 4 sides of the creative vision here that I'm interpreting. And so, let's move on to the judgment step of the art critique. Judgment step. So now we're gonna talk about the principles of art. For the principles, there is not much of a consensus of how many are there. There are a lot of them. A lot of them repeats themselves through different authors. So stuff like movement, pattern, contrast, emphasis. They repeat themselves through different authors, sometimes with different names, but the same concept. So what I'm gonna be doing here is considering, funny enough, what's on Wikipedia, but and I have seen the source. It's basically they're using most of the principles that the designer Alex White, in his book The Elements of Design, consider, but they switch up one of those. I think Alex believes in, what was it? I think Alex separates emphasis from dominance and hierarchy. Wikipedia bundles those and adds movement, the principle of movement. And after all my research, to me I kind of agree with Wikipedia on that, so that's what I'm gonna be doing. So that means for us, I'm gonna be considering 6 principles of art: movement, unity, contrast, emphasis, balance and proportion, and often principles that other authors have considered. I bundle up in. I kind of consider a part of one of those. Many authors believe in pattern, and I see that as a tied to unity. So does Wikipedia, I guess. What else? As I just mentioned, to me, hierarchy, emphasis, and dominance, they're all kind of the same thing to me, and Wikipedia, I suppose. And Alex White, Alex White differs on that, I guess. And finally, yeah. But it's complicated, honestly. Some authors believe the elements of art are also principles. It's a mess on that part. Somebody really needs to become the smartest art authority in the world and just say, no, these are the principles. I don't know, because it's kind of a mess. But anyway, so that's what we're doing. And so much like for the elements, the principles have no order we need to follow, but I like to start with the principle of movement, which by the way is not tied to the fact that there's an animation going on here. It's something different. The principle of movement in art is how about how the artwork can move your eyes, guide your eyes in some sort of path or direction as you look at the art. That is a thing. I always mention the example of the manga Dragon Ball Z from Akira Toriyama, because that artist was very skilled at drawing a panel that naturally moves your eyes to the next panel of the comic, and then to the next panel, then to the next panel. Very good example of the principle of movement. Another easy one is just like arrow signs, which are even a part of Team Fortress 2, but they naturally move your eyes to the direction they're pointing to. I honestly have no idea if that's culturally ingrained in us or something more biological. I don't know. That's the kind of stuff for psychologists to figure out. But for our purposes, that's what the principle of movement is. And so, do I sit here? Principle of movement. I think the most noticeable spot where I sit is on the extent of the lab coat. So remember, I always like to mention the elements of art that were a part of it when I can, since the principles are how the elements are used. So in this case, the elements that are conveying to me the principle of movement are the forms, shapes, and is the color helping a bit? Not sure the color is helping, but I think the texture is helping a little bit here, because I see a very subtle texture here. So shape, form, and texture I think are what helping, conveying the principle of movement here to me on the back part of the lab coat. And also I sit slightly on other parts. I wonder if it's so I wonder if I should mention them. Stuff like basically the gloves and the fingers. I think I see slightly kind of moving my eyes through the extent of them. Also, very slightly. I'm not sure I will mention the last one, because maybe I'm forcing it. Even the fingers, I'm possibly forcing it, and so yeah. But I will stick to the lab coat here, and so that's the principle of movement. Does that convey help us with any of the parts of the creative vision? So does this lab coat here, the end of it, the tail of it, help with the idea of a character for Team Fortress 2? Not really, right? Necessarily. Why would it? Magic uses a lab coat, but that's just one class, so and you could play a game in a server with no medics, more common than you think. And you would still be playing Team Fortress 2, and you would be easy to realize that, so yeah, not helping when it comes to that. What about the idea of, that's easy now, medic or physician? Oh well. This kind of geometry of this kind of clothes is pretty typical of coats, right? Lab coats. Lab coats, doctor's coats are not the only ones, I think, with this, but they're a pretty typical one. Because trench coats, for example, I think they extend a bit more in the front part. Although I think in this case medic, it also goes for the medic. Medic is just bringing the lab coat back, I guess. Well, anyway, yeah, trench coat's another example that we could see this geometry. But the color also helps us. In this case, the white color, I think, helps us a bit consider it as a doctor's lab coat. Even though I didn't mention the color for the principle of movement, so is that a problem? I don't think so. I guess like the principle of movement is conveying that this is a code of some sort, right? And the white is helping to convey it's a lab code, so I think that it's helping with that easily. What about the idea of what about tying it to sci-fi in one way or another? Not exactly tied to it, right? It's kind of okay, like sometimes you're gonna see sci-fi movies with medic and they ought to be wearing a coat, but you know that's not exclusive to sci-fi, so I don't know. And finally, the idea of an intellectual stuff. Again, I don't know. I think if we're gonna think about tropes, usually like intellectuals are more tied to the exact sciences rather than the biology ones. I don't know. So physics, chemistry, math, and so as far as the idea of an intellectual go, I don't see the principle of movement helping with that. Okay. Although it's true that chemistry. If we're talking about chemistry, you ought to use lab coats to work on a lab, right? Much like you would do for other professionals on the fields of biology and stuff. And I guess there's that, but I don't know. It's not too far off, right? I guess it does not exactly tie strongly to intellectualism necessarily, but it's very close to, you know, especially because not sure if there's an exception, but I believe in most countries you are prohibited from performing from working on any of those things, from having a job in any of those fields without a license, and you need to be taught in a formal university to have a license, so you know. But I don't know. Yeah, so okay, it's kind of whatever, I guess. It's not it's not too far away, but I just don't see it as an instant clue, let's say. Okay, so let's move on. Let's talk about now the principle of unity, which I think it's like the principle every artist probably loves. Unity slash variety, also I should mention, because it's so easy for it to help the art creative vision. But anyway, Unity is all about different parts of the artwork apparently working together, and there's like so many ways you can accomplish it. At least from the theory that I'm following here. Continuity can allow for that. So like the white here being continuous over the code communicates that the fabric here is the colors working together, let's say, to constitute the code. Repetition, patterns, proximity of that can communicate unity. Okay, this is gonna be a silly example, but for example, the fingers of the medic in proximity communicate that this is actually a hand. Anyway, an example of it. And the opposite of we talk about them kind of together in that theory that I follow, but the principle of the opposite of unity is variety. So, and you can use either or to accomplish what you want. But for example, the red tie on near the medic's neck is an example of added variety. The blue here, it's an example of variety that was added. What else? The unique forms of the medgun, it's an example of variety. And so yeah, The glasses, funny enough, the nose and the mouth and the human features, you know. It's basic. You might think, oh, that's obvious that was going to be there because it looks like a person in the first place. But visually speaking, if you think about, I don't know, horror art or something where you can see like a bunch of eyes and mouths everywhere, that's an example of there's not that variety of it, you know. But Unity to convey something fearful. Funny how it works, right? Anyway, okay, I mentioned a bunch of examples for Unity and some for variety here on the Medic. Does any of that tie to the idea of a character class for Team Fortress 2? So, some easy stuff here that I'm thinking, oh, I have mentioned this before. I think I'm gonna mention it again. Because a lot of the stuff that I said does not exactly help, right? Although a little bit. I mentioned variety on the face, and we could talk about repetition on the legs, you know, humanoid stuff. It's a man, it's a person, has 2 legs. And so there is Unity here to convey a humanoid morphology, body. As I said, fingers and the hand. And why does all of that matter? Something that I said before, but basically because we have a pattern on Team Fortress 2 that all characters are humanoid. This is not Overwatch where you have like a hamster and some weird robots and stuff. Everybody is a man here. No, except maybe Pyro. We don't know. Everybody is human at the very least. So that means humanoid morphology, and so if that is an important part of the game's design, I've never seen that being admitted specifically, but it could be for Valve. So that would mean that the Unity here that communicates as obvious human and humanoid traits are working together for that idea, you know. That's kind of how I see it. So and there is very easy for you to find Unity when it comes to that, right? Because of all the symmetry. Symmetry is another way that I see you can accomplish Unity. You are you could say that both legs being symmetrical are working to constitute a set of legs, you know, a set of structure that keeps the person standing, you know, ties to the function of legs, I guess. But in any case, visually that is also what I think it's being communicated, and so on and so forth. We could even talk about things like the med coat being something made for humans, you know, classic for human culture. After I don't know what century. Did you know that medics didn't all use the color white? They started to one point when it was getting, they used brown, I think, but then white made it easier to see if a patient coughed on you, let's say, and there was something on their clothes. Being white makes it easier to see if there's something there. So a little bit of trivia for you. Anyway, yeah, okay, so Unity, I think we have a strong argument to say that's helping, at least with a pattern, let's say, on Team Fortress 2, of people. You always play with people on Team Fortress 2. And, okay, so what else? What about the idea of a medic or physician to be the idea for this class? Remember when I talked about the continuity on the white of the cloak? And how it and that would make it look like a coat that would communicate to us that it's some sort of lab coat or something, medical coat, I don't know. And so, you know, medical coat and stuff. You can also talk about the gloves, because there is repetition in their color and shapes and forms, I guess. And surgeons use gloves, right? So they must use gloves. I think all doctors use gloves, but whatever. Anyway, That also helps communicate that idea easily. What else? We could mention the repetition on the symbol, the fact that it's repeated twice. Not how the symbol looks itself, but being a red cross being repeated, I think helps also communicate that. Also repeated here on the what electrical on the batteries. I don't know of the Medga. What else? Okay, so I think it's good, well enough communicated. What about what was the other idea? Ah, to be typed sci-fi one way or another. So in this case, to have some element of sci-fi, perhaps I should say. Is Unity or variety/variety helping here? There is like a degree of unity on the shapes and forms of the Medgun, right? Because there's some repetition in it. There's also variety because it has a very unique shape and shapes and forms again, in comparison to the rest of the Medic, the visually of the model here of the Medic. What else? Something similar here. I mentioned before how like this box is the only square shape or cubic form that we see here. And it has all these features. We have the blue, I don't know what's this on the top of it, which to me appears to be some sort of electrical part of it. Maybe you could use some I don't know the name of that in English. Maybe you could connect it to jumpstart it like a car battery, let's say, or something, with electricity. In any case, unity and variety was applied by the author in different ways, but all of those ways are tied to the, I see, like, okay, I guess the important part is does all of that tied to sci-fi when in any case, in any way, especially on the box and this idea of this weird hose that's connected to some sort of electrical box, and how all of that is pretty well communicated to the shapes and forms, as I said, especially. Color less so, right, to me, because there are other black stuff here, the belt and the boots, and I don't see the black helping communicate the purpose of this necessarily. It could, another color could perhaps, if it was, I don't know, the color of the beam maybe, or if it was translucid, I don't know. There are different ways, not necessarily it would be better or worse, let's say, just different choices. Perhaps you would think a translucid Madigan would be more stylish, but in any case, that was not the creator's choice. But what I'm getting at is that I think it's some idea of science fiction is being communicated here because of all of this, of how the creator applied accomplish unity and variety. You know, if unity and variety was accomplished in a different way, because almost always you have one of those. It's like, I don't know if even possible for you to not get any of that. The best example that I have ever seen of an artwork that I could not talk about unity or variety easily was on Dadaist works of art, because to me at least things were kind of paradoxical. The way I saw it, it was some sort of patternized chaos or consistent chaos, but then is there unity there or variety? And to me it was kind of paradoxical. That's the best example I have ever saw of unity being hard to to define, let's say, in a work of art. But that's okay. I think always what matters is how the creator has used the unity and variety. In this case, I think it helps, as I mentioned, as I have explained my logic. So it's helping with that idea. I just look at the clock, but I didn't memorize it. Okay. What about finally the idea of what was the last one? An intellectual. This character it should be an intellectual of some sort. So we have, for example, the variety on the glasses, right? It was added there if there was no glasses there because of the trope that nerds uses glasses. I guess there being glasses there helps. A bit of a silly reason, but honestly, I think it just works. In any case, what else? There's all this stuff that I said for the science fiction part of the GUM. And as I said before, perhaps you could tie a little bit to it. Also considering it, okay, basically I already made this argument, right? Also considering that it's a doctor and doctors need to have use knowledge to treat their patients, basically. And so all of that's very close to the idea of an intellectual in one way or another, right? Both what I said before for the idea of a doctor and what I said for sci-fi, I think all of those are very pretty close to the whole schmuck here. And the glasses, I think, are a more direct approach to it. And because of the variety here, if it was like a bunch of glasses all around, you would kind of not get it. You would think this guy sells glasses or something, but that doesn't mean they're an intellectual or something, right? And if there was no glasses also, I don't think we would have the effect of a possible intellectual here, but the way, in this case, it would be the shapes and forms also, I guess. The ways the shapes and forms again were used, they have communicated. I'm gonna talk about shapes and forms often, but when I can, I think I want to try to focus on other elements. For example, when I talked about the lab coat, I did talk about the white, but I think I also want to mention the texture of how the little waves and how kind of folded the lab coat appears on some parts of it, which is expected from that kind of clothing. So I think that also helps a bit, the texture there. For points and lines, there was nothing for me to say because I didn't find any lines, and I just have found this one point here, which I don't think is doing much. What else? There's space and value. I also forgot. When I was talking about human morphology and stuff for character 1442. The use of space on the legs I think also helps because it's natural, right? Because if the space was like absurd, it would not be human, If the medic could stretch his legs on a very unsettling way, let's say. So the use of space here also contributes to that. I guess I didn't need to mention that, but I just did. Anyway, yeah. And so, okay, glasses helping because of the trope, helping with intellectualism. What a silly reason, but whatever. What else? Now let's talk about the different principle of art. So unity, as always, helps with everything. Unity/variety, but okay. Okay, but to be fair, also this was made by a company, right? So they have a quality assurance thing and whatnot, so we shouldn't be too surprised if they did good, let's say. Anyway, Let's talk now about the principle of contrast, why not? Contrast, how about the differences in the artwork and how do they affect the whole? So, easily I think the contrast is mostly on the color and also a bit on the forms. I think the Mad Gun has some very contrasting forms with the rest of the Medic because it has all these small elevations and sublevations, and the Medic, if the Medic is not exactly smooth, as I said before, I see a very distinct lack of sharp edges, so it's kind of pseudo smooth, let's say. No, just came up with that word right now. But in any case, I see this contrast with the forms of the Madigan and the rest of the character. Even with the rest of the Madigan, like as I said before, this is more geometrical, right? This is like a cube, and it's mostly a cube, and this is mostly a cylinder, and the Madigan is this unique thing with many details on the extent of it. So that's where I see contrast, and also on the use of color, because the black of the Madigan is in contrast with the white behind. Also the red on the gloves would be blue on the other thing, but in this case red. Also contrasting with both the black and the white, and also some contrast here on the black, on the dark brown of the pants and the white of the lab coat. What else? And there is also smaller sources of contrast, you know, for example, around the health symbol here, the red and the white, there's some contrast that make it think more easy to see. Contrast between gray and red. What else? There's even contrast through the color, to the shapes of the hair of the medic and the skin, the forehead of the medic, stuff like that. So I think it's very easy to find small sources of contrast, but anywhere, kinda. But to me, the strongest contrast is what I said, especially the forms of the medigun and the rest of the medic, and the use of color here. So even textures, you could say there's some contrast, honestly. So does any of that help with the idea of a character for Team Fortress 2? Funny enough, perhaps by accident or something, but I think the contrast of the gloves and the arms help a bit to communicate better the shapes and forms of the gloves, and also the contrast of the legs, of the dark brown of the legs and the white of the coat, also help showcase better the morphology and physiognomy, and so makes it easier to see that Medic is a human person, and so that's that idea for Team Fortress 2. But also in this case, I think a way more reasonable detail is the color of the gloves, red, the element of color here, which is tied to the team, one of the teams. The medic gets blue gloves on the blue team, so that's directly tied to the game design of Team Fortress 2. So there being that use of color. You know, if this was yellow gloves, we would kind of still have some red on these back parts here and the red cross, but I think it would be, and also on the tie, I guess, but I don't think it would be as clear. So I think the red gloves have a lot to communicate whose medic that is from each team, and that's very intrinsically tied to the game design, so yeah, help with that. What about the idea of a medic or physician? Okay, I already said this before, but the gloves are something that surgeons uses, and that probably all medics, all medics and stuff. And so there being contrast with the red and the white of the coat, I think makes it easier to think about that. Also, there being contrast with the cloak itself, the coat itself. Again, it's a medical coat, lab coat. Also, I think makes it very easy to communicate that idea. What about the idea of there's being something sci-fi in here? Well, again, I said that there is contrast between the Madigan and the rest. And as I said before, the Madigan is this sort of hose thing, but it having its unique. Even hoses are not shaped like that, right? So having some uniqueness to the design here, I think also helps with that. But I think what helps more is especially the electrical parts here and stuff. I don't know, because if I didn't, I could kind of mistake this for a fireman's hose, I think. So I think the tying this to electricity and stuff is very important. And in this case, does the contrast matter? I guess there is also some amount of contrast between the forms of the box here, which again are like geometrical, and the cylinder. This is like a cube, this is like a cylinder, and that I think has some contrast also with the more smoother forms of the Medic. So I guess that's helping also a bit. If this was like potato shaped, let's say, it would, depending on the design, it could not communicate something technological or sci-fi to me, but in this case it does, and I think there is some contrast helping with that whole idea. So yeah, I think it's helping with that. And finally, an intellectual. Again, only if we do it by proxy, right? Thinking, oh, medics are smart. And if you are using a sci-fi thingamajigga, you must be smart to use it. But I don't know if I would go down that road. Because as I said, there are like charlatans and false doctors who are not necessarily intellectuals. And anything about use, we don't, just visually we don't know that the medic has built this. We don't have like blueprints and stuff around, you know, on the pockets or whatever. And I don't think I would necessarily tie the idea of you need to be smart to use some sort of high-tech device, let's say. The design of it seems so intuitive even. It's just like there's a handle and another handle, and you kind of jerk the upper handle, right? Apparently it's something like that. You push it forward to activate it. So, you know, anybody can do that. You don't need to be an intellectual to use this gun. Of course, there are many there is like how you use that, for what would you use it, but that's a different kind of forms. And so, yeah, I don't see that contrast helping with that. And there is the glasses, as I said before. The trope of nerds using glasses and whatever. But which is a really, I really wonder if I should even, how well it really helps. Because there, I don't know, whatever. I guess if you're gonna fight, I guess if you're gonna do sports with glasses, that can be a problem and stuff. So depending on the sport. This is all sounding a bit stereotypical. I don't like it. So whatever. Let's just move forward. Anyway, I don't see that much contrast between the glasses. That's the thing. They're pretty discreet. Not. I mean, I can see them, but I think the contrast is so minimal. And I'm not sure if I would even say there is some contrast there. You know. Okay, now that I think about it, are there lines here on this part of the glasses? Um, I don't know. I will consider these forms just like a very thin tube, let's say, a three-dimensional object, not a 2D one. So in any case, very little to no contrast on the glasses. So I don't know. I don't think the contrast is helping too much with the idea of this character being recognized as intellectual. The contrast, at least. But anyway, let's talk about a different principle of art now. Let's talk about the principle of emphasis. So, emphasis, which emphasis are depending on the author's dominance, hierarchy, everything's about that. It's all about there being some sort of dominant focal area on the artwork, some area that predominates over others visually. And you can have, if you're talking about hierarchy, you can have more than one, and you can say like there's a hierarchy of focus, stuff like that. Multiple areas of focus, one stronger than another. Anyway, so where do I see the focus here? On the artwork of the medic. As with many other Team Fortress 2 characters, I think to me the focus is on the gun here. In parts with help of the contrast between the color, black and the contrast with the white, and the forms in contrast with the pseudo-smooth forms of the medic, the more different, unique forms of it. Remember how I said the different principles often help each other, influence each other. So yeah, now the contrast is, I think, creating also the emphasis. And what else? I think the element of space is helping a bit. When I said before that the Madigan has some generosity on the space between the Madigan and the medic's left arm. If the Madigan was like closer to the medic's body, I think it would communicate, to me, have a smaller focus, but in this way I think has the element of space is helping out. What else? Also some contrast between the black of the Madigan and the red of the gloves. What else? That's mostly it. I guess also the shapes, the exit shape of the Madigan, the circular or depending on the angle, elliptical shapes there are also unique, you know, so there is some variety there for the shapes. Don't think there is any other. Okay, there is some here, I guess. I think there is like those shapes are kind of unique here, a bit sparse, so variety is also I think contributing to the emphasis. So yeah, basically the Madigan is the emphasis. So, does any of that... What about the idea of making a character for Team Fortress 2? Okay, Team Fortress 2 is a shooter, first-person shooter. So, to focus on the gun, I think could be tied to the game design of it a bit, for there to be emphasis on the gun. The only problem with that logic is that some classes... Well, first things first, this is not even any gun, right? It's a med gun that you shoot healing. So that kind of has some... I think that has some considerations. Although, I don't know, maybe not that much, maybe that doesn't matter that much. But also I have stuff like the engineer, who's even Valve considers it, like on the picture here, engineer is holding the wrench. So, which is not a first-person shoot a gun, you know. So, but does that mean engineer is not part of Team Fortress 2 just because he's not using a gun? No, it's because you know, it's not just a first-person shooter; it's a class shooter. So different classes have different stuff, and engineer still has guns, even if the whole mechanic of building buildings is so important for the class. But anyway, so but it's still, I think it's not a rule that all characters focus on guns and shooting as their primary ways of contributing. Also, I could think of the spy, right? The backstab, you know. So, and the medic technically shooting, but it's shooting healing, so a bit different from what you expect, although still technically a gun. But yeah, so I'll just say that I don't think that that's a rule, but it's kind of an heuristic, let's say. It's kind of a rule of thumb that if we're focusing on the gun, that's very very close to Team Fortress 2 games design, to focus on there. Most classes, most classes have that have their focus on their guns in one way or another. Because we could talk about the scout being focused on their speed, but also the gun as well, because it's a scatter gun, short range, right? So it all ties well together. I think soldier, everybody knows for the rockets, spire for the flamethrowers. Demoman, funny enough, for the grenade launcher, for the sticky bomb, I think it's a pretty strong one. Which technically lays traps, don't shoot you, but it's a gun that does that, so everything's fine. Heavy, I think the size and health of it's pretty important, but the minigun also, the high DPS of it. So yeah. All that to say that I think the focus on the gun is helping a bit with the with communicating that this is a character from Team Fortress 2. The only thing is that if this wasn't the case for the engineer and the sniper, holding the range is not doesn't mean it's a problem, because there are exceptions, in other words. So yeah, but in this case, helping. What about the idea of some sort of physician or medic? So now we got in an interesting situation. If we consider the game design, if you know in-game that this gun shoots a beam that heals you, then it's obvious, then it helps with that. But the thing is, visually, visually I think one thing saves it, which is the red cross on the box that's connected to the medgun. So since this box connected to the medgun apparently it has the red cross symbol, apparently this gun is related to health and in some way or another, right? If this had a ghost symbol of the Ghostbusters, then that would change like everything. Oh, is the magic a Ghostbuster now? There's just that easily, right? Because I don't think, because this gun is something unique that we don't see in real life and stuff, and so its purpose depends a lot on the context here, for us to understand how it works. Unless it was a fire hose. Again, if this was like, if we had the symbol of the wow. The word escapes me in English, I know it in Portuguese. You know, of those who extinguish fires. Wow, can't believe I forgot that word. Maybe I'm tired, I don't know. Yeah. What is it? The fire guys. God. It's because in Portuguese it's completely different. In Portuguese it's like bombeiros. But it's not bombers, if we were to do a literal translation. I don't know. Let me check here real quick. Oh my god. Can't believe I'm doing this. It's fireman. It's not fire guys, it's the fireman. Okay. Yeah, so if this was the fireman symbol here, it would change everything, right? But in this case, since we can kinda have the symbol communicating that this is somewhat tied to health, you know, to the Red Cross and stuff. Then I guess the emphasis kind of works. You know, the emphasis is not on the symbol, But being a part of it, I guess we can make the connection. And there being emphasis there, I guess it kind of works. I wouldn't say it's like a strong fit, let's say, but I guess it kind of works. Okay, so following up from that, now it's easy, right? What about the idea of something touch sci-fi? If we're focusing on this strange device, which could come easily from a sci-fi movie, as I said, Ghostbusters and stuff. Is Ghostbusters sci-fi technically? I don't know if it's like horror or adventure, but probably also type sci-fi, right? Because of the beings and stuff, whatever, the beings, and yeah, don't cross the beings. So being emphasis on this unique apparatus and piece of technology, I think ties very well with this idea of some amount of sci-fi being a part of the design here. And what else? In other words, sci-fi was the magical ingredient that allowed Valve chose to use for the the game design, the game mechanics of healing with a gun. So yeah. Because as I said already, Valve could have chosen for the medic to just go near you and start bandaging you, and that kind of like increases your health regeneration, maybe, you know? That could be a game mechanic, but they didn't choose that. Would that be a good game mechanic is another question altogether. But yeah, visually that's what they went for, something sci-fi. And also in the game mechanics. And finally, about the intellectual idea and stuff. Similar to what I said before when I was talking about contrast, right? I don't think a sci-fi gun object ties intrinsically to intellectuals. Sometimes you see, I don't know what, on the Fallout game series, for example, a brute kind of character using some technological device. You know, I think those are super mutants. So they don't seem to tie well to communicate the idea of being an intellectual, even if they are. There are some, but anyway. But they don't communicate that, and so. But they still use technological devices for example, on that game, for example. So all that to say that. You know, it's kind of a weak link, because yeah, maybe you are the one who designed it, but we don't know that because we just see you using it, so it's kind of a weak link. I don't know. Okay. I wouldn't say it's helping exactly. So let's talk now about that was emphasis. Let's talk now about the principle of proportion, which is all about the sizes of objects in different parts of the artwork, how do they compare to each other and stuff. So pretty easy for it to tie the contrast. Well, depends. Contrast depends on the proximity often, because juxtaposing is a very important part for contrast often. And but anyway, let's just talk about proportions here. So okay, there are not that many details in different objects here, right? I guess if I were to talk about the proportions here, the little bags are the ones with the parts of it, the elements with the smallest proportion, the objects. Let's be careful with our terms here. The objects here with the smallest amount of the smallest proportions or scale. You can use either word. After that, I see the whole apparatus here, the back of the medic, the box and the cylinder stuff, and the medgun kinda have similar proportions also to me. And I would also, if I were to like separate the medic, I would also consider the arms of the medic and the legs having that kind of proportion. But if we're not gonna do that, if we're gonna consider just the medic as a single entity, then the medic is the one with the highest proportion. Like considering, and no matter what, I see the medic as the entity with the greatest proportion here, considering the torso of the medic and all that. If we were to separate the medic from its limbs and other parts of the body, the head I think would have its own spot. But I don't know if we should do that. We can visually, I suppose. Obviously, it doesn't make sense if we're thinking about the medic here is not like a little a little action figure that we can detach the parts of it, but visually I think we can do it. And so, and also that matters depending on the character, right? You can talk about, for example, what was it, the Charger from Left 4 Dead, which has an arm way bigger than the others. So I think it makes sense to talk about the proportions for limbs, for example, in that kind of scenario. And so I don't think it's, I think there's some merit to making that kind of judgment here also, of that analysis of look at it in that way. Anyway, so yeah, just to recap, I think the little bags have the smallest proportion. After that, I think comes the head of the medic. After that, the electric box and the cylinder plus the medgun. I'm kind of considering both of these together, as you can see. And the medigun and the limbs of the medic, the arms and the legs. And after that, the torso of the medic, and the rest has the biggest proportion of all. So, with all that said, does any of that help with the design, with making a character class 1442? Well, I think the proportions fit what we would expect for a humanoid character. So this is not the Charger from Left 4 Dead. And again, we see, okay, we see different body types on Team Fortress 2. But I think the important part is that even if obviously there are going to be differences if we compare them to each other. But I think as far as their proportions, their inner proportions, let's say, when it comes to that, I think it follows a pattern here. The head is smaller than the limbs and the torso is bigger than everything, something like that, I would say. So basically, if their proportions here follow humanoid bodies, humanoid proportions, so I think again we're following the pattern of people are being the player characters for our Team Fortress 2. Yeah. Always so far. Give me a second, please. Okay. What about the other idea, that of this being some sort of medic or physician? So I don't see the proportions tying to that in any way, right? Because physicians don't actually walk around with bags and stuff. Maybe in the past, but then again, this is kind of a more modern medic, doctor. As I said, the coat is white nowadays. So yeah, and after that, besides that, I don't think anything else ties well when it comes to the proportions, right? Funny enough, if we were to do an art critique on the medic holding the bones saw, then we could talk a little bit about that, right? But since we're considering the medgun, do an art critique on this mod of the medic holding the medgun, much like it's being showcased here. Then we can. But since we're doing like this, I don't think we can. I don't think I see the proportions being tied to the idea of a medic in some way. The proportions, again. we talked about other principles and we tied that to the idea of a medic or physician, right? But when it comes to the proportions, it would have to be there be some sort of element that ties to medics and stuff, and if it has its own proportions, I think it would make it easier because then you can compare. For example, if I were to hold the bone saw, does it have its own proportions? Not sure if it does also. But yeah, that's kind of the idea. I talked about something like that before. What was it? Was it the minigun for the heavy that I mentioned to have its own proportions and so makes it easier to focus on it? I don't remember. But yeah, so I don't see the proportions help with that idea of a physician, communicating the idea of a physician or medic. We could talk about what about the idea of this box thing is tied to the red, it has the red cross symbol and it's tied to this gun. So what about all of that? Again, this would be a kind of weak link, like I said before, for contrast in the idea of an intellectual. Not contrast, emphasis with the idea of an intellectual. Because, okay, it has something to do with health, apparently, but what exactly, right? And even then, when it comes to proportion, it's kind of sharing its proportions as I see it with the limbs of the medic, the legs and the arms, so it's not even unique. It doesn't even have its own proportions to call attention to it, so, you know, by virtue of contrast with the others, if anything. Because it's not even the biggest proportion. Even if it was the smallest proportion, if it was unique, I think it would help, but you know. What was it? Was there a class that I mentioned something like this? I don't remember if it was the engineer of the range. I don't know. I think there was some class or some map where I mentioned some example like that. There was some stuff with the smallest proportion, but all of them tied to the same thing, so I consider that to be contributing to the creative vision. Don't know if I remember right now, but whatever. Maybe it was a map. In any case, let's talk about now the idea of sci-fi stuff. So, is there something related to sci-fi here? Kinda, yeah, as I said before, the med gun, right, and the electric box behind that powers it or something. So that would be it, but as I said, I think it shares the proportions with the limbs, so it's not like unique, right? So I don't see it as communicating that well through the proportions, you know, through the proportions, not. And finally, what about the idea of an intellectual and stuff? Well, now that I think about it, maybe I could consider the glasses as an even smaller proportion than the bags, and then the idea would kind of make sense, right? What I said before, of something with the smallest proportion being uniquely tied to an idea. But if we're gonna go there, should we also consider the small tie that it's not even the whole tie, right? Just a part of the tie that we can see. I don't know. Being a part of the tie kind of makes things problematic because if apparently this has the proportions of a normal tie, which would be considerably bigger than the glasses, right? It would have closer proportions to the bags, but we only see a part of it. So I don't know. I think we should consider visually. We should consider just what we see. So this small part of the tie, I I think would tie well. tie would would also be sharing the smallest proportion with the glasses if that was the case. Also, maybe the small, the red cross symbols on the shirt. Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, ties are not too far off from the idea of an intellectual, of communicating that, because I don't know. I know some of them wear ties, work in offices, so it's not it's not that weak of a link if we're gonna think about communicating that idea. Maybe that's even why Valve decided to add it. So maybe this is fine. Maybe the proportions here are helping with the idea of an intellectual. Well, unless the problem is the red crosses, the symbols of the red cross, the two red cross symbols, which I think also share a bit of that. So being intellectual, tying some ideas of intellectualism with the red cross. Again, we kind of have to go a little longer, take a longer path to get there, right? So, okay. I think it's not helping too well, the proportions. And finally, the last principle of art for me to talk about is that of balance. Just give me a second, please. I need to think about something real quick. For the proportions, what was it that helped? It was... Oh yeah, the humanoid proportions for the HF2's game design. The idea of a medic didn't help, the idea of sci-fi didn't help. Yeah, okay, so it was just the design. Okay. So... Okay, balance. Let's talk about the principle of balance. The principle of balance is all about there being apparently some sort of state of tension or equilibrium in the where we can see in the artwork here, and how even or uneven that is. So does this look like stable? Does it look like it's going to break or something? Does it look like it's going to fall down or something? That's kind of the idea of the principle of balance here. So do I see it here somewhere? Yeah, mostly balanced. I think many games chose to go for more balanced aesthetics, just balanced visually, because I think unbalanced can make something possibly very expressive and unique, but harder to understand easily. So I think it's especially like these more simpler games, less conceptual games, they often go for balanced aesthetics. But anyway, yeah, but at least that's what I kind of seeing here for the medic, as I see on most of the time 1442 art. I don't see any state of tension here whatsoever, right? Like visually speaking, because I don't know, maybe probably we can expect the medic is tensioning his muscles, but I don't see that being communicated visually. If the muscles are like being shown bulging or something, but in this case I don't see it being communicated visually, so I don't see visual tension here as far as the principle goes. And as far as balance goes, like if there is only a very slight one on the gun, maybe like it's kind of going forward, so maybe it's gonna fall down a bit, but medic is holding. It's not that well. It's not that there is very little imbalance here, right? It's mostly balanced. So that's it. Just basically the tip of the med gun, since it's kind of going farther from the center of mass of the medic. I think there's a little bit of imbalance there. pretty interesting to see that, because if the medic gun was like being held closer to the medic's body, I think there would be like basically possibly no unbalance whatsoever here, visual unbalance whatsoever. But since the medic is holding it up front and kind of like in this way, that I think it communicates a little bit of unbalance. A little bit, just on the tip of the medic gun. So does any of that tie to the idea of a character class 1442? Being balanced, the human body in this standard position, let's say, standing still, is balanced, but that's not the only thing that's balanced, and I don't think it's the most balanced thing in the world. It's not even like a triangle, which is the most stable shape for architecture and stuff. You don't need to always use it, but just here's a tip for you. So I don't see as the balance here being iconic for Team Fortress 2 in one way or another, and neither the little tip of unbalance. You could say that, oh, it's the tip of a gun that's creating this very small amount of unbalance, but I don't know, since it's just the tip, I don't know. Also, being this unique gun and stuff, I don't think it's good enough to get there, personally. What about the idea of some sort of medic or doctor? Also, end of stream time, but I think we're at the very end of the critique today. What about the idea of being a medic or doctor? Again, don't see it helping. In this case, it's previously we talked about how the medic gun has the red cross symbol linking to it visually, and so we can kind of take the path, the conceptual path, let's say, to get there. This case is an even longer path, right? Because we have to think about the tip of the gun, then we have to think about the gun, then we have to think about the fact that there is a red cross behind, and we have to link all of that to the idea of medicine, of health and stuff. So the weakest link so far, I'm not going to consider it as contributing to the creative vision here, as far as the principle of balance goes. About the idea of sci-fi. Okay, so this is interesting. The small amount of unbalance is on the tip of the gun, as I said, which has its unique forms and stuff. But I think the most like technological things on this gun, let's say parts of this gun, are more at the back. Basically the electric box and the wires and its unique shape, the forms. These unique forms could help a bit, even though maybe I just realized it's just a fireman's hose when it comes to the forms, maybe. I wouldn't know for sure if the fireman's hose is like smooth at the end or whatever. But in any case, even if this has unique forms that a fireman's hose does not have, I don't think it ties that strongly to communicating technology and something sci-fi. We as far as this thing go, we could have it in real life. As I said, maybe fireman's hoses have exactly this geometry, these features. It's more on this part, how it communicates, especially to this weird electric box, right, that tells us this is not a fire hose. And so I don't see the balance helping too much. I think it helps. I think it does more than the idea of a medic, right? When it comes to the principle of balance. But yeah, I don't think it helps too much still, despite that. And finally, the last idea for the creative vision for the last principle, which was some sort of intellectual, to communicate that this character is an intellectual stuff. Okay, this is interesting because if the tip of the med gun had some clues to that, maybe if it had like some notes sticking to it, like don't overheat or something, sometimes you see that kind of stuff in stories and media, like a bunch of notes tied to stuff, to some sort of a part of technological device. That's like some intellectuals on some stories do that kind of stuff. It's perhaps the unorganized intellectual trope. I don't know. There's probably a different name for it. But yeah, I think there could be ways. So I think there could be ways to communicate some intellectualism, let's say, when it comes to the principle of unbalance. But I don't think we don't see it here, right? I don't think I see anything like it. Also, and also balance is like, again, intellectuals are not usually balanced or unbalanced visually, right? They're not like pending, just falling down or whatever, you know. That's just silly, ridiculous when it comes to the balanced part of the artwork. I also didn't mention anything about that for the ideas of being a medic or a sci-fi, right? But I also think it's obvious, kind of obvious, that those are not tied to those. Medics are not balanced or unbalanced visually, usually, and neither is sci-fi stuff. Some sci-fi stuff tends more to balanced aesthetics, some tend more to unbalanced ones. There's no like rule there. Not even a trope, I think, which is the best we could get, I guess. So yeah, with all that said, we've gone through all 6 principles of art that I use in my art critiques, and a number of them helped, right? I think all of the parts of the creative vision were covered at least once. The movement helped with the idea of being a doctor, and did I mention intellectualism there? Maybe not. So the movement helped at least with the idea of being a doctor. Unity helped with everything. Yeah, Unity helped with everything. So it doesn't always, by the way, but it's kind of easy to help with many. So anyway, Unity helped with all parts of the creative vision. Contrast helped with the ideas of a doctor, with the ideas of a sci-fi thing, as far as I remember, with the idea of did it help with the idea of a character class? Ah yeah, because of we can see it has gloves and it's a human person, so yeah. Emphasis helped with sci-fi and character 1442 shooter game. Balance didn't help with much, right? Didn't help with anything whatsoever. I think not, right? Because of the source of the little imbalance there was, and the ideas that we have chosen for the interpretation. And finally, proportion helped with the idea of 1442, a character class 1442, and I think just that. But yeah, also I guess it was the variety that communicated intellectualism. So yeah, so not all principles helped communicate the creative vision here, but at least one of them I'll help in all of them, some more than others. So I think it was very strongly communicated that this is a character 1442 in many different ways, right? And that this is a doctor. A number of those also communicated that the Madigan and the aspects of sci-fi. The hardest one was the idea of communicating intellectualism and stuff like that. Ah, by the way, I'm also, when I was doing that interpretation of an intellectual, I was also considering the lore, because the medic, well, first things first, he has created the Madigan, but he has also done stuff like take the brain of the dude and put it into a pumpkin and make him live as a pumpkin. So Medic is kind of a genius. So anyway, yeah, it was. So the idea of communicating intellectualism was like the least, the weakest one, let's say. The rest was, I think, really well communicated in general. And with all that said, I think I'm gonna call this a successful work of art. Congratulations, designers of the medic. I guess I know we even have an easy path for feedback and suggestions and constructive feedback, right? And suggestions. So like, if the idea of communicating that is an intellectual is that important, perhaps add other clues to it, you know. But then again, I also wonder how important that idea was for the design of the character. That's the part where the the authors ought to know better than I. But yeah, but those would be my suggestions. So I know that I think about it. Maybe they didn't want to tie medic too much to intellectualism because maybe the engineer is kind of has a bit of that going on also, right? And maybe they didn't want to have two brainiacs, let's say. So yeah, maybe they wanted like both to be smart, but not necessarily to focus on that too much. I don't know, ideas. In any case, that was it for today. Join me tomorrow for more gameplay and art critique. Tomorrow I'm doing either a map or a gun, probably a map. So join me, same time, same place. See ya then. Bye.